Hello, this is Frank and Umer with Analytics AI/ML. Recall during our last session, we talked about DMAIC. As part of Lean Six Sigma, the Six Sigma portion is the methodology known as define, measure, analyze, improve, control. We're going to talk about a number of different improvement methods, but we're going to put a little focus on the project charter and explain the different improvement methods and when to use the project charter. Define means define the problem in terms of the process. We usually will begin with the process of is leading to which results in, and we'll explain why we do that in just a moment. Next, we'll move to the measurement phase. Measure. We want to measure the current state of the process, the baseline, and gather information, data to build our case because we're really taking a scientific approach to how we're improving business or organizational problems. Next, we're going to analyze the root causes to get to the source of the problem. So we're not solving the symptoms. Then we'll move to the improvement phase where we'll test things out on a small scale to make improvements. And then finally, we'll put in place controls. That could be an audit, control plan, some sort of what's known as bulletproof or idiot-proof or foolproof activities or controls that'll ensure that it's difficult for someone to do something wrong. An example of that would be when you go to a service station in the United States, you can't put the wrong type of diesel fuel into your car tank because the nozzle is made larger and it won't fit. So that's an example of how you put in place a control to prevent errors or mistakes. Okay, there's a quick overview of DMAIC. We're going to walk through the major phases. During the define phase, we'll really identify what problem are we trying to solve. In cases where we need to do a full-blown Six Sigma project or other type of project, we'll identify the entire project charter, which will include our objectives, our goals, our team selection, the scope, the boundaries of the project, the specific deliverables we expect to get from that project, and basic logistical activities in terms of when that team will meet, how long the event will go, and those sorts of things, your milestones. Okay, so with that said, let's move to another chart here. The next slide here, we're going to look at the improvement methods. This is important because when we start looking at our project charter, what we want to be sure of is we're not spending a lot of effort putting together more administrative overhead than we need. For example, let's suppose in the far bottom where we can see the gray area, those are things that you can do very quickly. Just do it. Just do it could be like 5S. Listen, what we're going to do is we're going to go and look at our work area and we're going to kick off tomorrow with a review, a walkthrough of our work area to identify areas that we have items on the floor or in our work center that we don't often use, and let's remove those things. Or let's put a little red tag on those items that we normally don't use, but they're taking up a lot of space. And then we'll identify those to be removed later. What that's going to do is free up space and free up clutter. We'll then think about how do we move things around or set things in order so that they're more standardized and everybody knows exactly where things are. And then we'll go through and make sure that we shine. We call it clean, sweep, remove dust, particularly if you're working in a hospital or a medical device type of a company where cleanliness is super important. But even in our normal workplace, by removing dust and shining and maintaining things, the equipment and things will last much longer. And that's just a way of instilling this discipline. Okay, so just do it, or things like that we can do very quick. An 8D or an A3 is just a really simple, very fast DMAIC that can be done literally in a matter of minutes or an hour or a day. And then we move up to more difficult things. Now, as you move up the scale, the impact that they can have on your organization increases on the y-axis, as you can see, but it requires more effort, more administrative overhead, more oversight. So if you're doing a full rapid problem-solving event, could be a 2 or 3 day event, or if you're doing a Kaizen event, which is often a 4 or 5 day event, then that's going to take more time. If you're training people on how to use all the lean tools and Six Sigma methodologies and so forth, shown there in purple, then that's going to take more time, but again, it can have a larger impact. And then we'll just say you can move all the way up through innovation, machine learning, and full digital transformation, which could take multiple years to implement that type of an initiative. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look at the project charter. So in the project charter, what you'll see here is we've laid this out in a spreadsheet format so that it can be filled out very quickly. You can create your project ID scheme however you like to do that. You can take this basic template, create an online form with Google spreadsheets like the way we have done it here, or with some other internal application, but the basic points are pretty straightforward. We'll identify the project identifier, so we have some sort of naming convention. We'll put the project name in next. As we scroll through, I want to go to the top of that, go to the very top, please. So if we scroll to the very top, you'll see that we'll identify the problem with the problem definition, the process of is leading to which results in. You'll see the scope and boundaries that we'll set. We'll come back and we'll talk more about these items in a moment. We'll go through and look at the scope, the critical to quality metrics. We'll look at the project benefits and costs towards the bottom. Go ahead and scroll up. And as we move further down, we're going to move through to this row called 34. And in row 34, what you're going to notice here is the different improvement methodologies that we might use. And these correspond to some of the items we saw on the previous chart. In some cases, we're going to use a DMAIC. In other cases, we're going to use what's called a JDI, or just do it, or a rapid problem solving event, or a Kaizen event, all the way out to digital transformation. So depending on what we're going to do, let's suppose we're going to do a just do it. Then what we'd do is we'd click on row 34, we'd highlight JDI and put that in bold. And therefore, we know that we're working on the just do it. We could also create this as a drop-down list, and then the individuals can come to this row, click on the just do it, and only the just do it will show up there. So different ways that we would highlight what it is we're doing. Let's suppose in this particular case, we're going to go and look at a DMAIC project. So in a DMAIC project, what we'll use is this full project charter. If we're doing a just do it, we'll probably just identify that it's a just do it, and we'll fill out minimal information in this project charter, just enough to get everyone on the same page, get people started, but we don't need to put in a lot of detail if we're doing a just do it. In the case of a DMAIC, what we'll do is we'll go to the top of the charter and we'll fill it out step by step. Now we're going to use a very simple example, and I'll just explain the concepts. Let's suppose we're going to look at the process of making coffee. Okay, so we have started up a new little coffee restaurant or a cafe in our local area, and we're looking at how we can improve it because we've noticed that we're not hitting our sales targets, our costs are a bit high, we're not making our profit, and we want to figure out how we can improve that. So the project ID might be something associated with the way we define DMAIC, so it may be DMAIC dash and then the date, so 0616 2018, or 16 June 2018, whatever naming convention we had come up with for our project identification. Then we'd move to the project name. We'd name this improving the coffee sales process, let's suppose. Next step is we'd identify the problem. This is where the problem statement becomes very important. So in this particular example, we're saying the process of, and we'll have to define what process we're referring to, is leading to, which results in. Now, the way to think about this is the process of is the actual functional area or a sub-process or a major process that you're focusing everyone's attention on. In this particular case, let's suppose that we decide by going to this next, the seventh row, that we're going to define this process scope as the boundaries start at this point and they end at this point. This is really important because if we don't define the boundaries, then it's going to be hard to define the problem definition and bound the process in a way that everyone knows what we're working on. So we'll say that the process is going to start at the point that a customer comes into the restaurant and places this order until the point that we've fully completed the order, handed the coffee over to that coffee drinker, and they paid us, okay? So then we have a start, customer places order, and the end, customer receives order and makes payment. So now we know the boundaries of our process. So now we go up to the top, we say the process of, in this particular case, receiving a customer order and delivering it, right, would be kind of the process, because it's the process that we just defined in those boundaries, is leading to, and we don't probably may not have time to type in everything here during today's session, but you'll get the basic idea that from the process of receiving a customer coffee order and delivering it to the customer is leading to, and we'll say, okay, what is it leading to? It's leading to some sort of what we call failure modes or mistakes or errors or long cycle time, or perhaps any particular activity within the process that's undesirable. And that's resulting in something, okay? So the leading to is important because the leading to is going to help us identify steps in the process where we can probably make improvements. So we get input from the subject matter experts, and they would tell us things like, well, a lot of times we're making mistakes, we're not preparing the coffee ready correctly, or the customer isn't happy because the taste, or it's too weak, or it's too cold, or so we might say it's leading to weak, cold coffee and long cycle times, or long, waiting times for the customers. And that is resulting in lost customers and lost revenue, as well as higher costs, right? Because if you're making mistakes and you're losing customers, and you're preparing the coffee and it's weak or it's cold, then that means you're losing money, because you're preparing something, you're going to have to rework it, redo it, and you're paying for more supplies and labor and everything that go into making that coffee. Okay, so the process of is leading to, which results in. Then we would identify the start and end of the process, any things that are in scope or out of scope. If we have, say, 3 different restaurants, then we may say, listen, we're only going to focus on restaurant number 1. So what's in scope would be restaurant number 1, and then what would be out of scope would be restaurant number 2 or 3. In other cases, if you're working in an organization, you may identify certain product lines that you're going to focus on first, or certain business units you're going to focus on first, because it's usually impossible to do everything at once. Okay, so then from there, we'll then identify the critical to quality metrics. The critical to quality metrics are really the things that are most important, right, for the customer, and for our executives. Now, the reason why we say the process of is leading to which results in, because the results in are usually the financial or the regulatory or the legal or some strategic measurement that's really critical to the executive. And the executives are your sponsors that will allow you to invest the money to actually improve the problem. So we always want to identify critical to quality metrics that cut across our process area that we identified and have a specific impact that an executive can understand, which is usually dollars, right? So one critical to quality metric is probably going to be lost revenue, right? Another critical to quality metric, just from our understanding of what we identified, is that we're getting unsatisfied customers because of all these other items that are happening. So we can ultimately, get to what are those real critical things that are driving the customer dissatisfaction. When we first write the charter, we just may want to put customer abrasion or customer dissatisfaction to start with. And then we know that part of that dissatisfaction is based up on the quality of the coffee. So maybe we'll put in there cycle time for perhaps, and quality of coffee, right? So the cycle time deals with the waiting, and then of course the quality of the coffee deals with it's too strong, or it's too weak, or whatever it might be. Okay. From there, we'll then identify the very specific metrics that we're going to be tracking, and we'll try to identify those in a little more specificity. So, for example, what we would do in this particular section is, let's suppose we're talking about customer. So now for that customer, we may want to say something about how we're going to measure the satisfaction of our customers moving forward, based upon the quality. And so a customer satisfaction measurement that we might use might be Net Promoter Score, where we do a survey and get a response back saying, would you be willing to recommend a friend or a family member to our restaurant? And that would be an indication of how strongly they're committed and how loyal they are to our company, to our cafe. Cycle time, we talked about that. We look at the cycle time by going out, doing some time and motion studies, some surveys, operational audits where we wait at different times, peak time, average time of the day, early morning, late in the evening, whatever it might be, and figure out on average how much time is it taking to complete the process and how much waiting time there is. And then we had captured that information in terms of the waiting time or cycle time. We may then say that as we move through the next sections of this, we would identify how much we want to improve, right? So we may want to say that we want to reduce the average wait time by 50% and bring it from 3 minutes to a minute and a half. Okay, so that would be a 50% reduction. And then, of course, we look at things such as lost revenue and try to get some sort of estimate. Maybe we see people come into the store or into the cafe, and then they leave early, they get out of line, or they come through the drive-through, and some people are getting in the drive-through and then are leaving the drive-through before they pick up their order. That's an indication of lost revenue because they're waiting too long and they're not willing to wait in line any longer. Okay, so then we could measure that based upon what is our average order size, how many times that happens, multiply the number of times it happens by our average order size, and now we have some sort of idea of how much lost revenue there is each day. Multiply that by 20 or 30 days, depending on how many days we're open during a month, and now we have some sort of idea of what is our monthly revenue loss. From that, we can then calculate our benefits and our costs, right? So if we're losing, say, 20% of our sales, then we know the estimated benefit of this project would be a 20% improvement in revenue. We make some estimate about how we could reduce the wasted materials and labor, and that might represent another 12 or 15%. So we would take 12 or 15% of our labor, multiply that out, and put the dollar value in that particular row. And then we want to make sure we identify our project leader, our sponsors, go through as part of our business case. We would then say something like, to business case is we will reduce costs by 10%, increase revenue by 20%, resulting in a net profit gain of whatever that turns out to be when we multiply that. When we work the details, it could be 20, could be 30% total improvement in profitability. Okay, so that becomes our business case. Maybe in this particular case, we need to make sure we don't do any things that are not compliant with government regulations regarding food. So we don't want to speed things up or make mistakes that are going to put our customers' health and safety at risk. So we'll make sure we do those things. If there's IT or data analysis support, we would identify that. We'd then highlight, in this particular case, this is going to be a DMAIC project. We'd identify the name of the facilitator who's going to help us facilitate the project. Project manager is going to be the operational person who's going to be responsible for following through on all the action items over time. If we need to update any of our procedures or documentation, we would do that. And then here is where we would identify the deliverables. What do we want? We should have an improved process that now shows a reduction in costs, and improvement in cycle time, and improvement in net promoter score, customer satisfaction, those sorts of things. We should track that over time and see the improvements taking place 30, 60, and 90 days. All of the findings and recommendations in terms of improving the process, improving the problem would be identified. And then whatever we find from this, we would do a report out to our project sponsors to update them on what we've identified for improvement opportunities. They would then sign off on that improvement opportunity. We would start working on those improvements and then track the success of those over time. If there's any pre-work required before the project would kick off, we would identify those things, identify who's going to be in the meeting, what location we would meet at in terms of facilities, the date of the kickoff of the meeting, and then, of course, the individuals who are going to be included in the session. Now, what you'll notice here is red, green, yellow, and green. And red, if you only have 2 people, that's not enough people to solve a problem. Complex problems are not going to be solved by just 1 or 2 people. Okay, so you need more people. So you can see here, depending on if it's a Just Do It or DMAIC or whatever, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to about 10 or 12 people is usually about the right size team. We don't want to have much larger than that on a Kaizen event or DMAIC or whatever. And then as we get to too many people, if we get 13, 14, 15 people, you got too many people, it goes into yellow. And then if you're certainly well over 14 or 15 people, then it goes into red. You've got too many people, okay? So you generally want to try to stay in that green range. And then finally, at the end, we want to do a project assessment. Make sure that we've identified our sponsor, our project leader, project manager, We built our business case, got agreement, got that signed off. We've identified the improvement method. If it's something that's simple that we can do very quickly, don't go through a lot of effort putting together a full-blown project charter. Assign a simple little project and go out there and start initiating the just do it. Start making changes immediately. Certain things are very simple to do. Others are more complex. We've got the charter signed off. Are there organizational change risk issues? Meaning, are there things that are going to be difficult because people are going to resist change, or the organization is going to resist the change to this improvement? We need to identify those things, put in place what we call a change leadership plan to overcome the resistance. And then from there, we just confirm that we don't overlook any regulatory compliance or financial or legal risks that could put our project or our company or our customers in jeopardy. Okay, so there we are. High level project charter. Again, keep in mind, if we go back to our DMAIC in our PowerPoint presentation here, what we're doing is we're trying to make an improvement to our process. And one of the first parts of that in a DMAIC or a Kaizen event or rapid problem solving event is a project charter. If we're doing something like 5S or teaching someone a simple problem solving why analysis, 5 why analysis, something of that sort, it's known as a just do it. So you don't have to go through as much of this detail. You just capture the highlights, get people moving very quickly. In the next sessions, what we'll do is we'll talk about process mapping. And then once we map out the process, we'll talk about the DMAIC, meaning how do we remove waste? This DMAIC is defects. It's an acronym for defects, overproduction, processing excessively, waiting time, inventory, excessive motion, all these types of things that create waste in your process. From there, we'll go through some other tools, move into measurement phase, analyze phase, and improvement phase. But again, this has been Frank and Umer with Analytics AI ML talking about the project charter and different improvement methods. Thank you.